Welcome to the Only One Shot Golf Podcast. I'm Jim Gallagher Jr. Don't forget to subscribe to wherever you get your podcast. And don't forget to get your copy of Only One Shot. That's available on Amazon, and that was written by VJ Trolio, the teaching professional at Old Waverly Golf Club in West Point, Mississippi. Special thanks to Steve Azar for allowing us to use his music, and you can find Steve at steveazar.com. Today we have Tom Shaw, the Abilene Christian men's golf coach, on the podcast. This is his 8th season now at Abilene Christian. What a season it's been. They won the WAC and got their first NCAA bid, and they'll be going out to Stockton, California. We'll get to talk to Tom about that and the atmosphere and just kind of the roller coaster day. They had that final day to win the WAC. But he's been around golf a long time. Played at Georgia Tech, was on the team with Trip Eisenhower, Charlie Reimer, and David Duval. Played under legendary Coach Puggy Blackmon. He played 7 years out on the nationwide tour. Decided to get into coaching. Puggy gave him a start as an assistant. He then headed down to Tulane and spent about 7 seasons there, and then Katrina hit, and that's just a heartbreaking story and devastating story. We'll get into that and the things he had to do with the team, and just grew as a man, grew as a coach, and I think it was just one of those trying times for him. He went on up to Vandy, spent a few years there, and then down to Abilene Christian. But Tom Shaw's got some great just advice and just a good perspective on life that I think everybody's going to enjoy. So let's get Tom on the line. I can't wait for y'all to hear from Tom Shaw, Abilene Christian men's golf coach. Well, it's my pleasure to welcome Tom Shaw, Abilene Christian men's golf coach, who have made it to the NCAA's Regionals. Tom, thanks for being with us.
I appreciate it, Jim. Thank you very much. We're excited.
You should be. 8th season now at Abilene Christian. What a year it really. Actually, last couple of weeks, I guess, for the Wildcats. Won the WAC, got their first NCAA regional bid, and off to Stockton, California. But take us back to that final day and some of the emotions you're going through, especially the final hole, as crazy as that finish was.
Well, we put ourselves in good position. You know, you always want to play with the leaders and the guys that you're chasing. And, you know, we were in second place coming into the last round, and really, we had the guy who was in first place and second place individually. So we thought, okay, if those two guys play well, we'll have a chance. And then, unfortunately, our best player throughout the year just had a poor day. And I thought, well, this is not going to end well.
Yeah.
You have to rely on your 4 and 5 guy to kind of pick up the slack. But they did. And after 9 holes, I thought, okay, we're probably in it. And then I was getting reports from my assistant coach that we're making a lot of bogeys, and I don't look at golf stat at all because it stresses me out. I don't want to know, but I have an overall feel based on how I perceive body language and guys, and so I thought, well, it's probably not going to happen. I'm hearing about a lot of bogeys, and so I stuck with my number 1 man who was vying for the individual championship, and just wanted to be with him. And I got a report from my assistant coach on the 16th tee. It says, hey, things have changed. We are now right in the middle of it. So I got excited. And about, I think with 2 holes to go, I got another text from my assistant saying, we have the lead now. So we've gone from absolutely being out of it to now having the lead. And it just changes emotions because I'm trying to keep my player pressing. I'm trying to keep him chasing for the individual title, because I think if I tell him we have the lead, he might go into, prevent mode. And as you know, that all that produces is preventing the win. So he was still in chase mode, and he made a great par on 17, and then we still on 18th tee, and I get a report that, hey, all we need to do is double bogey or less, and we're going to win. But by that time, the wind had kicked up. It was a left to right wind on the last hole, which, for a right-handed player is kind of tough. Mm-hmm. And he hit a decent drive, but the wind took it and put it right into a bush. So we had to take an unplayable lie, and, he's not aware of where the team stands. I certainly am, and my stomach's just going nuts. And he kind of chops it out barely and ends up on the green with a 2-putt for the win. And the Sam Houston player, if he makes birdie from the same distance, he ties and we go into a playoff. So it's just a mess of emotions. And fortunately, we were able to 2-putt and come away with the victory.
Do the kids want to know where they stand, or do your players want to know where they stand when they're out there, or how do you approach that as a coach? Because that's a tricky one.
Yeah, I think it is at all levels. I think some kids like to know and probably do better knowing it, but there's also an equal number of kids that I know they're going to use that information and it's going to adversely affect them. So
yeah,
it's just about knowing your kids and figuring out what works for them. I've got a kid from Mexico. He's checking the scores all the time on his phone, which I think is just ridiculous. But he loves that. He loves to know where things stand, and that can motivate him. But I know the kid I was following, Alex Klaus, is he just needs to just keep on plodding along and trying to do his best. And too much knowledge for him is probably it's going to hurt him.
Yeah, you just got to know your kids, and they've got to be honest with you. I mean, they've got to be able to say, "Hey, I want to know," or "I don't want to know," and it's different people. I kind of always wanted to know where I stood, but then there's that anxiety. It's always easier to come from behind and win that way. But when you've got the lead, then you get into, like you said, the prevent mode, and that's when you kind of get in trouble. But what was the atmosphere with the guys after they'd won and everything? Take us through those emotions that they had. They'd finally accomplished all the hard work they put in.
Elation, you can imagine. We've lost to Sam Houston, I think, every time for the last 7 years. So to finally win. It's just it was perfect because we've got a bunch of seniors who have really seen this program grow from not much to what it is today. So it's a great reward for their hard work, and I just think that anytime kids win, it's just a blessing, and I think they felt like, hey, this is validation for the work we put into, and it's been a wild year for us because we opened up the spring season, just finishing dead last at our first tournament. And there's, the players only meeting, there's talk and how do we go to where we need to be from finishing last in the tournament. And the guys really took ownership of the program, which is what I love to see. And they made it happen. So I think all of that combined to just produce an emotional outburst that was pretty fun to watch as a coach.
Ryan Cabbage told me the same thing happened to him at Charlotte. They just kind of had a get together and sat down and said, we got to reevaluate where we are, and the team does have to take ownership. But it pretty cool though. But you're in. You're sitting in the clubhouse for the selection show. What's that atmosphere like for these kids? They got to be excited. They know they're going. They just don't know where they're going to go. What's that like for those guys and yourself? You've been there in some of your other previous coaching positions, but what's it like for them?
They spend all their time watching other teams do it, whether it's basketball or other golf teams. So it's pretty cool for them to actually be in that role. And we had a bunch of people in the building at Byron Nelson Clubhouse here. We can hold a lot of people, and we invited all of our fans in there. So I mean, we had a pretty good crowd, and so I think the guys finally, maybe for the first time, felt like, hey, there are actually people that follow us and are interested in our program, because at golf tournaments, college golf tournaments, it's usually just parents and coaches. So to see all the people show up for this and other coaches from other sports teams, it was a pretty special experience. And I was not expecting to go to Stockton, California. I'll be honest with you. So we're trying to work through some flights there. I think everybody thought we would go to Texas A&M because it's just 4 hours down the road. But it doesn't matter where we go. We're happy to be at the next stage, and you can't win the national championship without getting into regionals. So we're excited about that.
Yeah. And you'll be out there with Arizona State. They'll be the 1 seed, Washington, Stanford, LSU, Oregon. Some pretty good teams out there. But like you said, it's an opportunity. You got to take it as that, and you got to just keep rolling with it. But tell us a little bit about the clubhouse, the facility there at Abilene Christian, for some of our listeners that may not be aware of it. Tell us a little bit what you all have to offer there.
Small private Christian school. We have pretty good golf facilities. We have alumni that are pretty interested in the sport and want to provide opportunities for our guys. So. Byron Nelson always had a connection with the school. His brother was on the faculty here, and Byron was on our board of trustees for a while too. So it was only appropriate that when we did build the clubhouse, we were going to name it after Byron Nelson. And so there's a lot of his memorabilia in the clubhouse, along with some ACU stuff. And it's just a locker room, indoor training area, player lounge, and then we look out onto our 4-acre practice facility outside, which was the beginning of it in 2018, and then the clubhouse followed soon after that. So for a little West Texas town, we have some pretty good golf facilities, and they're on campus too. All of this is just the kids can walk to this facility, so it's a pretty nice arrangement we have.
Yeah, that's pretty cool to be able to be on campus, because if you go to some of these schools, they drive 30 minutes just to get to their facility. But what kind of, when you're recruiting kids, what are you looking for in their players and to get there to come to Abilene?
We're looking for great players, great kids, great students. I know being a Christian school makes it a little different, because there's some kids that are not necessarily looking for that aspect, and when we don't recruit only Christians, but it's just part of our culture, part of our establishment here. One of our sister schools is Pepperdine, so you can't tell me that the Christian school can't win. Obviously great golfers we're looking for, and somebody who's coachable, because I'm a coach that likes to. I obviously don't like to change guys when they come here, but there is some coaching that goes on. So I need some coachable kids and kids that want to learn and grow. So we're some of the high profile recruits we're probably not getting, but the kids that want to get better, want to enjoy great facilities, want to grow as a person and be part of a great team. Those are the kind of kids that come here and flourish. And I think as we have more success as a program, we're starting to attract better and better players, and on the international front, it's an attractive place for them as well. We have several international players on our team, and they find the transition pretty easy and pretty enjoyable for them.
Yeah, recruiting had to be pretty tough during COVID, where especially on the international side and for your international players. But kind of got out this past summer to finally get out and visiting and recruiting with the kids face to face. So that was always a challenge. But let's go back in time and let's get to know Tom Shaw, the player. You played at Georgia Tech under the legendary coach. I believe you were under Puggy Blackmon, were you not?
Under the legendary Puggy Blackmon. That's right.
And he'll tell you he's a legend in his own mind. But I could say that because I'm friends with Puggy, and I've known him since I played, and he was one of the best coaches in college golf, and he was coaching on the women's side or helping out on the women's side when he was at South Carolina when my daughters were playing, and always loved to get to see him, and we always tell some stories, and some of them are not so much lies, but just a little changed over time with Puggy. But what was that experience like at Georgia Tech? Because you all had some good teams too.
He recruited me, I think, as a GPA boost more than anything, or to room me with the troubled kids, because I was a good student, so I was looking at Georgia Tech as a regular college option. And, I just wasn't I was an okay high school player, but I wasn't anywhere near what he was. I mean, he brought in Charlie Reimer as in our freshman recruiting class. Trip Eisenhower was in our recruiting class. I mean, I wasn't even in the ballpark with those guys, and didn't really play my first couple of years. And Puggy kind of told me in a nice way, hey, if you want to play, you're probably going to have to go somewhere else to play. And I just, I was a pretty quiet kid, but for some reason I just kind of, stood up and said, Puggy, there's no doubt in my mind I'm going to play here at school. And I think he was just shocked more than anything. So he said, well, okay, you're not on much money anyway. You might as well stay on board. So I stayed.
Well, and you survived Reimer and Eisenhower, which is a feat in itself.
I roomed with Eisenhower my second year. And,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, Tripp. He's a great roommate. But every day was different and unique and entertaining, especially when you throw Reimer in the mix. But we brought in David Duval for our last 2 years, and he was obviously a great player. And I got better just being around better players, and that's why I tell kids a lot today. Hey, just stick around better players. You're going to get better regardless. And so I got better. I played my last 2 years. Duval came on board. We had Briney Baird for a year. We had Michael Clark on the team. So Jimmy Johnson. So, we had a great 6 guys, and I was able to get some great experience and be a part of a really good team. I mean, seeing a kid like Duval, who ends up being the number one player in the world later in his career, I still think about some of the things that he did and tell people stories of some of his accomplishments. He was tremendous.
What did you learn from being around David? And the other guys were great players, but obviously David, incredible career. What did you learn from being around David for a couple of years?
His practice habits were pretty different, whereas I just assumed if I stayed out there longer than anybody else, I was going to get better. And it was true to a point. But David would come out there, let's just say 30 minutes, but he had a plan. And once he accomplished that, he was gone. He didn't feel the need to just mindlessly hit balls. He was he had the mind of a 20-year tour veteran. I always tell people that, because when everything he approached, from practice to play to tournaments, he just looked like he'd been on tour already for 20 years. He was just kind of smart. He had a high golf IQ, knew what to practice, knew when to practice, knew how long to practice. And then once the tournament started, I mean, he knew way more than we did about how to get a good score out of the round.
Yeah, it's funny you said that, because I worked with Dr. Coop, who was a sports psychologist at North Carolina, and those are the things he said. You practice with a purpose. And we had Jack Nicklaus on at the Masters on Live From, and I asked him what separates that elite player from the rest, and he said being prepared, preparation. And I had never had that answer. What would you say separates that elite player? You were around David Duvall. What separates that elite player from maybe the rest?
I saw it more on the mini tours when I played. There were guys that just were just happy to be out there. They didn't really have any understanding of what it took to be an elite athlete, not just golfer, but an elite athlete. And the guys that succeed out there, they go about things differently. Their preparation is better. They're committed to a plan. There is a plan. I guess I should start with that. And they're committed to it, and they kind of have a long-term vision about what they're trying to accomplish, instead of just going day to day. Where am I going to go eat? What am I going to work on today? I think they already know that stuff. So being very disciplined and kind of long range thinking, I think can really help guys when they're out there playing professional golf. And then to become elite, all of that is just ramped up. There's got to be some talent in there. Obviously, Duvall was just, an amazing talent, and his dad, Bob, was a great player too. So David has always been around great golf, and I think that the young guys coming up, if they can just be around better and better players, just compete. David was a ferocious competitor and hated to lose, and didn't lose very much. I can tell you that. So.
No, he didn't, and he did hate to lose. That's a great answer to that, because that's always a tricky one. There's always different views on it, but it gets down to that gut feeling that you just want to do whatever it takes to be better than everybody else, and that inner drive to be great and not to be afraid to be great. And I think David definitely was one of those guys. You played professionally for 7 years and on the Nationwide and several other places. Why did you get in coaching, and who gave you your first shot?
I was towards the tail end of my 7 years and had some great experiences, and did play some good golf, but wasn't playing great at the time, and just had a baby and bought a house, and life gets in the way of a lot of stuff. And I figured, hey, I can kind of see the writing on the wall here. I'm not gifted like a Duvall, and hanging around the Nationwide Tour, Nike Tour for another 5 years is probably not going to ensure career success. So I thought coaching was going to be a good option for me, just because I was pretty organized as an individual, and I thought I had some things to offer young people coming up from high school into college, and contacted Puggy about maybe getting on board with him, because I don't think he'd ever really had an assistant, or at least much of an assistant in the past. And he let me come on board for about a year and a half, and got some really valuable experience. By this time, Puggy was at South Carolina and had a very good team there too, with Kyle Thompson and Eric Ecker. So I got to be around some really good players and coaching some good tournaments, and kind of saw how, from a coach's perspective, a coach's eye, how college golf was working at that time. It was really an invaluable experience.
What were some of the things he taught you? What did you learn from Puggy, not only as a player, but that helped you in your coaching?
I think he taught me to recruit better. The first time he sent me out to watch Ryan Hibble, who was out playing for the University of Georgia. Yeah. And, at that time I was pretty analytical. So I thought, golf swing was everything. And I went to watch Ryan. I thought, well, that's a horrible golf swing. He's never going to make it. And I went back to Puggy and reported just that. And of course, Ryan turned out to be like a 4-time All-American. So I was clearly not a very good evaluator of talent. So Puggy taught me that side of it. And I think just in terms of knowing your players, understanding what makes them tick, which is really that's the essence of coaching right now. Is not the X's and O's and the golf swing, although that's important. It's about knowing your players and developing them, not only as players but as people. And I was always intrigued by the fact that Puggy's former players, always stayed in touch with him, and vice versa. And that told me right there that Puggy invested his time into the players about who they were, what their lives were, and who they wanted to become, and less about, hey, let's make sure we shoot good scores so you help our program. But Puggy was really invested in the individual, and I took a lot from that.
Absolutely. Steve Spurrier said he knew he was a successful coach when his past players brought their kids back to meet him. And I think there's a lot to be said about that. But you then go to Tulane, where you're the head coach from 2000 2006. You had some great teams, and then unfortunately Katrina hit. But you had to do some adjusting, like so many people down in New Orleans. And I believe you moved the team to SMU or somewhere out when classes were disrupted and everything was just chaos down there. Take us through those that last year, that year of Katrina.
We went to SMU. I think some other teams went to some other places. I think SMU was a blessing for us because we went to Dallas Fort Worth, and the golf metroplex was available to us, and people really opened up their arms to us. Bent Tree Country, David Price at Bent Tree Country Club, Randy Smith at Royal Oaks. I mean, just said, hey, come on, let's go. You guys can play, practice as much as you want, because we didn't know what was going on back home. And getting the guys enrolled in classes at SMU, that was my job. And I tried to piece together their schedules as best as possible. We had to find dormitories for them. And so that's not something you train for. It's just something you think, hey, I hope I get all this right. And we did for the most part. But what it taught me is this, and that if you recruit high character kids, your program's going to benefit from that in some form or fashion. And I had great character kids who took this huge, catastrophe, huge bump in the road, and they did the best with it. They made the most of it. I mean, we're talking Michael Thompson's on the team there, and there's a lot of upheaval, but now they get to play Dallas Athletic Club, Royal Oaks, Bent Tree, practice. We were still able to compete in some tournaments, albeit, we had to kind of piece together some things in terms of balls and gloves, and we didn't have any of that stuff. So, but I had some resilient kids that are good character kids who are now older and wiser and very successful. But it was an unusual time for sure, and it's stuff we look back on and still tell stories about with when we get together occasionally for reunions and stuff like that. But we made the most of it. In fact, the interesting thing, we had a match against SMU while that was going on, and it was a pretty tight match. The last group was Michael Thompson against Colt Knost, and it wasn't a year or two later that those two met in the finals of the U.S. Amateur. Michael was at Alabama, Colt was still at SMU. So it was pretty interesting prelude to what was going to happen at the USAM.
What did you learn about yourself during that period of time?
I had a kind of a sense of calmness, even though I didn't know what the next day was going to hold. I felt maybe not at peace, but I felt like, hey, this is going to turn out okay. We're going to be fine. Take care of your kids first, and the rest will kind of fall into place. And I think we all learn from adversity. There's going to continue to be adversity. And if you build yourself up through that, you're just able to apply that to certain situations. And then you feel like, no matter what happens in front of me, I have a pretty good foundation to deal with things and try and make the best of that, help other people along the way. Because, sometimes we get so wrapped up in golf that it feels like, well, this is the most important thing in the world, and it's really not. But you can go through things in your life that can be applied to golf, that can help you get through some of the downtimes of golf, which there will be. You're just not going to play at a Scotty Scheffler pace for your entire career, or you're not going to be able to coach at Oklahoma State pace for your entire career. So it's just anytime there's adversity, I think you can learn from it and be able to apply it to stuff that happens to you, stuff that happens to your kids. It could be some great teaching moments for the future.
And you've got your own family, the balance of that as well. And that's always the tricky part. That's people forget that y'all have families too. How do you juggle that? Because I mean, these kids you bring into play, they're like family to you. I mean, you're kind of mentoring young men along the way and trying to raise your own family.
Yeah, and I think in a school like ours, that's a mission that's given by the university. We're not something that, hey, this is a good idea for you to help these kids out. It is your directive that you're to grow these kids, you're to mentor these kids. That's your primary directive. The golf and competitive aspects is important too, but these kids are now your kids. They're your family, and your mission is to make sure that their 4 years are successful and they leave here ready for leadership or whatever. So it's pretty clear what my mission is here, which is great because that jives with what I've always tried to do with my coaching. And they're my wife and I've got college age kids too now, so they're just like 10 members of extended members of my family, and I hope they feel the same way.
Absolutely, I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do because you guys are an important part of their lives. But Vandy calls, you go to the SEC for a few years. You've had some pretty good players up there as well. What was that experience like playing against the SEC teams?
Oh, it was great. The recruiting was a lot easier on a certain level. I was automatically in the conversation with some kids, whereas at Tulane, I was, phone calls didn't last very long. So we had Luke List on the team, which was just inspiring to watch. I mean, talk about a great ball striker and somebody who made it look easy. And on kind of the opposite end of the scale, we had John Curran, who's, maybe could carry it 250, but was just an incredible golfer and grinder and a bulldog mentality and a great putter, wedge player. And so we had pretty diverse players, but we had a good team, not a great team. And I probably wasn't a great coach then. I think I'm a far better coach now than I was then. So I apologize to all my former Vanderbilt players. But it's great to be at that level. You're playing against the best. You're playing against the Billy Horshells of the world, the Harris English. Georgia had so many great players. Florida was great. South Carolina was really good. It's just cool to be at that level. I think coaching was probably more fun on the Tulane level and where I'm at now, because when you get to the SEC level, there's high pressure. There's jobs at stake. There's a huge emphasis on performance, hey, win or else, and I get that, and that's why a lot of those coaches are paid pretty highly for that. I enjoy coaching more at the level I'm at now, because the kids are, they come with maybe fewer members of their entourage, and they're a little more coachable, and it's just more enjoyable for me. I feel like I can have more of an impact with these guys. But the SEC is, that was great, and Scott Limbaugh has done a great, incredible job at Vanderbilt. They're one of the elite programs now, and proud of what he's done. And but that's a whole different, SEC is a whole different ball game, and we got to have a.
Well, and you're also at both Tulane and Vandy. You're recruiting academics at an even higher level. Not that Tennessee's not where I went to, but it's a little different level of athlete as well. Golfers are easier to get those smart kids because for the most part, they're pretty good in the classroom.
Yeah, and I think Georgia Tech has had a good academic reputation. I wouldn't say Charlie Reimer fit in with that, but he did okay, and he graduated. But I think generally golfers are coming from pretty good backgrounds, and a place like Vanderbilt can really attract some really high quality players. Northwestern's the same way. Wake Forest is the same way. Cotas there, recruits some really elite athletes and students. So you definitely compete on the national level, even though you have a fairly high academic reputation. Stanford's the same way. Conrad Ray does a great job out there too.
You mentioned what you've learned as a coach. What are you most proud of in all your years of coaching?
Well, that's a good one. I think, I think I still maybe have some moments ahead of me that I'm going to look back and probably answer that question clearly. I think the whole Dallas SMU Hurricane Katrina thing is one of the things I think that we made about as good of that situation as we could have, and I think that the players would probably say the same thing if you talk to them. I mean, championships are great, but I love hearing kids come back and saying, "Hey, I just got a job in an accounting firm," or "I just got married, I just had a kid." Those things mean more to me than going to regionals, which is cool and fun, and I want that. But when the kids do other things, that makes me feel better as a coach. And that probably sounds strange, but I don't have one moment I think that I'm proudest of. It's just kind of the thing I love about coaching is that every day is different, every year is different, and we're going to have a new class of guys coming in next year that are going to take me places that I haven't thought of, and it's just an incredible job to have and to impact so many kids. So I'm fortunate where I am.
That's well said, because I always would tell my girls that one played at LSU and one played at Mississippi State. It's really about the kids. It's not about the coaches. It's not, sometimes I see coaches, not all, but sometimes they get caught up in how the kids play, and it's a reflection of them. But it's really about the kids and mentoring young men and young women. And you guys, you're obviously doing a great job with that. But I appreciate you spending some time with us. Good luck out in Stockton, California. It's going to be a fun ride. Go out and enjoy it, and we look forward to keeping up with y'all. And have a great week out there.
Jim, thank you very much. I appreciate your questions and your time, and thanks for having me on.
Here we go.